When you think about the best NASCAR modified drivers in history, you think of names that won a bunch and had a certain charisma and presence around fans and in the garage area. However, there is one name that seems to be left off that list. He has wins in major events and even a title. After a heavily contested battle with the most popular driver in the past 20 years, he came out on top. Yet nobody seems to give him the credit he deserves until now. And that driver is Jerry Marquis. Jerry Marquis' modified success began in the early 90s while driving for Bob Judkins' 2X car at the Riverside Park Speedway, where he won 3 consecutive modified championships. In 1992 alone, he won 13 features to clinch the title. While in the same year span, he won 3 straight modified titles at Monadnock Speedway, while winning 4 straight Pro Stock titles from 1990 to 1993. All of this helped him win the 1991 NASCAR Weekly Racing Series Northeast Region Championship and became the first New Englander to earn the regional honors. However, Marquis never raced a full NASCAR Touring Series season until 1996 on the Modified Tour and 1995 and 97 on the Busch North Series, where Marquis believed he learned racing from the best at the time. He was able to win twice on the Modified Tour, but wouldn't return to full-time competition until 2000. This was when his legacy on the tour begins to come to fruition. Before the season started, the most popular driver on the NASCAR Tour was Reggie Ruggiero. He moved on from longtime car owner Mario Fiore in the Teddy Bear Pool's number 44 car for the third and final time. This iconic duo won 37 races from 1987 until their final separation after the 1997 season. Reggie became the driver with the third most wins on NASCAR's all-time win list for the Modified Tour, and won all the major race events at all the big racetracks in New England. However, the Reg and Fiore came up 1 spot short of the championship crown 7 times. But Ruggiero and Marquis would trade track success at the Riverside Park Speedway throughout the 80s and 90s. Ruggiero had the most wins with 93, while Marquis had 3 titles. As quickly as the Reg would win more and more races, he'd gain more and more fandom, while Marquis quietly and consistently won the war and brought home the crown at season's end. This would lead us right up to the best part, the 2000 NASCAR Modified Tour Series Championship fight, where Jerry Marquis would become the most underrated champion. After playing an impromptu free agency game for the NASCAR Modifieds in 1999, Marquis would win the SK Modified Championship at Stafford. Then in 2000, he signed on with Mario Fiore to race in the now all-black Teddy Bear Pools and Longview Rentals number 44 car. Now at the time, this wasn't going to be a full-time season, but the results kept showing, and they went on in hopes of delivering that all-impressive NASCAR title for his car owner. Now Fiore only had 1 car and 2 engines, so every penny mattered to go racing, and he needed sponsorship. The man who majored in marketing actually hired a firm to run an analysis to see how much his TV exposure meant for his prior sponsor of golf. The analysis showed around $170,000 per season, and Fiore knew that he didn't just want to be given a check to race. He wanted to give the value back to his sponsors. In the meantime, the Reg would continue with his number 2 car for Tony Maffo. The season opener for the Modifieds saw a change as there was no Thompson icebreaker due to a court battle. Instead, it was the annual Stafford Spring Sizzler. Marquis was mired deep in the field where he started 20th and was able to get the lead from the Reg on lap 117 and lead until there were 65 laps to go. Rick Fuller would take over the lead and hold off Reggie and Marquis to win the opener and his third Sizzler. Marquis ended up sliding back to 6th when the checkered flag flew. It was a good start for both drivers, and Marquis was able to make up for the poor qualifying result with a top 10 as the tour headed south to Richmond. While at the 3/4 mile track, lead changes would be the name of the game here, as there were 8 of them in the 150 lap distance. The Reg took the lead late with 14 to go and held on for the win, while Marquis snagged a 4th after starting 10th. The point lead was 40 points between the Reg and Marquis. After a tough race for Marquis at Stafford, Marquis sailed into Riverhead, Long Island in need of some points. After starting in 18th, Marquis was able to patiently get himself in a position to challenge for the win. And with just 43 laps to go, Marquis took over the lead and snagged his first win of the year at the bullring. After a 13-year hiatus, the Seekonk Speedway returned to the NASCAR schedule. Not only did the summer heat up, so did Marquis. He grabbed his first pole of the year. So after leading the first 52 laps, he would wait until there was 24 laps left to make the winning pass of the race on Mike Unitsko. He'd win in back-to-back races and become the first multi-race winner on the tour for 2000. Now Marquis was within 16 points of the leader in the championship chase. Heading into the Magic Mile of New Hampshire, a little tire war was developing in the series. This race allowed the teams their choice of tire suppliers to use between Goodyear and the softer compound Hoosiers. In addition, Marquis and Fiore decided a few days before this event that they'd race the remainder of the season because the race winnings from the prior 2 races would allow them to run the remainder of the season. With 22 to go, Marquis would draft off John Blewett III to take the lead. He would fall back and finish an eventual 6th. And after nearly 30 lead changes, John Blewett III would hold off Mike Christopher to get the win. Marquis moved to second in points at the halfway point in the season. After getting another top 5 for the year at the Nazareth Speedway, it was finally time to race at the Thompson Speedway after a long court battle for track ownership. The extended delay for racing at Thompson looked like it wasn't going to work out well for Marquis, but after starting deep in 31st, he made the move for the win with just 33 laps left to win the Budweiser kickoff at Thompson. With his 3rd win of the year, he would take over the points lead in the championship standings. Throughout the month of August, Marquis would stay consistent by getting 2 straight runner-up finishes at Watkins Glen and again at Thompson. This would help grow his points lead over the Reg by 71 points with 6 races remaining. But by the end of the month, he would fall 14 laps behind the leaders at Stafford due to a broken steering rack and eventually hitting the wall and finishing 21st. This would cut his points lead down to a slim 11 points as they headed into the Labor Day event at the Waterford Speedbowl. At the Speedbowl, Marquis knew he needed to get back on the podium to maintain his points lead, and that's exactly what he did. He noted that his team had to adjust on the car all day to get some speed into the car, and the veteran he is, was able to get the most out of the car as possible. He was flirting with the top 5 all night, and throughout the whole night, Reggie and Marquis were in each other's crosshairs all race long. On the final restart, Marquis took advantage of the outside lane that came in and crossed the line second. Now after post-race inspection, the winner Mike Christopher was DQ'd from his first win and Marquis encumbered the win. Not much in the points would change, but the Magic Mile was next, and the point rival Ruggiero was one of the best there. Heading back to the Magic Mile, Marquis held a 21-point lead over second-place Ruggiero. But that was about to change. It was only fitting that those two started next to each other on the front row, and the Reg took point as the green flag flew. The Reg was very excited to get back to New Hampshire, and it showed as he led the first few laps and was a factor all race long. The lead changed hands 8 different times, but none of them included Marquis, as he ended up with a top 10 finish of 8th while the Reg made a move for the win, but came up short and settled for second. When the dust settled, the point leader changed hands and Ruggiero was ahead of Marquis by just 7 points. Determined to get the points lead back, Marquis and company brought their Performance Technology Racing Engines car to the special 300-lap Stafford Fall final race, ready for anything. They started the race off from the 6th position, and the patient man that Marquis is waited until lap 246 of the 300-lap race to take the lead. After a grueling 20 caution race with 13 lead changes, Marquis hung on for his 5th win of the season and took back the championship point lead by 18 points. Only 2 races remained, and Marquis just needed to stay clear of trouble. However, the tight paperclip of Martinsville was next. The penultimate race for the season took the green flag, and Marquis started up front in 3rd, way the eye of the storm in the middle of the pack. While Marquis seemed to just be riding easy during the first half of the race, he was giving up positions on the racetrack, falling to the back half of the top 10. While that was happening, the Reg kept moving up and took the lead early in the event and eventually the point lead as they ran. However, Marquis would make his way to the front, and with around 30 to go, he had the 2 of Reggie in his sights. The 2 would go side by side for laps late in the race, and eventually Marquis would get a nose ahead, but Reggie would somehow use the outside lane at Martinsville of all places to get back by him. Marquis had a nose to the bottom of the two a few laps later, but caught the curbing on the entrance of turn 3 and spun himself out late in the race. However, the veteran Marquis didn't panic and kept the car in gear and only lost one position when the caution flew. It's amazing how not waiting for the caution to fly and instead trying to keep the car moving to get back up to speed really rewarded Marquis a bunch from losing what could have been the championship there. When the race restarted, Reggie made a late move to pass the leader into turn 1 and spun the leader Christopher. No penalty was given, and on the final restart Marquis made an aggressive but clean move to get up to second place and held on to finish their his nemesis in the title chase 1. With the run, Marquis was very pleased and excited for the finale race.
We started this year with one race at a time, and now we're one race from the championship. And I'll tell you something, if I got something to say about it next week, we're going to get it. The last three, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really geared up for it. I want this bad.
Marquis and Fiore would take a slim 8-point lead into the finale at Thompson, which was just 2 positions on the racetrack. As the sun rose on the finale for the 2000 NASCAR Modified Tour season, only Jerry Marquis and Reggie Ruggiero had a shot at the title. Reggie only had 2 wins to Marquis' 5, and Marquis had the better average finish at Thompson for the season so far, with an amazing 1.5 to Reggie's 3.5. It would be an absolute war, and the hype was real. However, the way this one turned out, nobody would have guessed it. Marquis and Reggie traded places in the top 5 for the first 30 laps and didn't let each other get too far ahead of them. They followed second place Tony Hirschman around until the caution flew on lap 64. On the restart, the 2 leaders would lock wheels and crash, sending everyone into a frenzy to avoid them. Marquis received a lot of left rear damage while the Reg only had a small amount of visual damage from the grandstand view, except some damage to the right front suspension and toe. As bad as Marquis' damage looked, not having any suspension damaged would be the saving grace, as damage to the suspension is more important to the handling of the car, so Reggie's damage would be more severe since it affected the toe. It was all hands on deck allowed over the wall as both teams rushed to fix their cars. They both joined the field, but it seemed that Marquis' car was more drivable than Reggie's. Marquis came from being one of the last cars on the lead lap to a contender for a decent finish in a damaged car. In the end, the Boehler 3 car would hold off Mike Stefanik by a bumper to win the World Series, and while Marquis was still able to pass cars, he would end up salvaging an amazing 5th-place finish, while Ruggiero finished 12th. In what started out as a season that wasn't supposed to be a full-time gig, turned into one of the greatest championship battles in series history. Only 36 points and a difference of only .12 for an average finishing position that separated the top 2. Jerry Marquis and his car owner Mario Fiore were able to share their first ever NASCAR Modified Tour title in Victory Lane and where the big champions ring. Marquis was not the noisemaker. He never overdrove the car and always had something at the end for something if he needed it. His finesse helped him win the title, and even with driving for a team that wasn't as financed as others, he racked up the most wins in the 2000 season. Fans seem to forget he was the one who is a champion on the Modified Tour and was the one to deliver Mario Fiore his one and only title. But Jerry Marquis didn't peak after this title. He was ready to win more and more. As a new season approached, a new paint scheme for Fiore and Marquis debuted. The white teddy bear pool's paint scheme returned, and Marquis picked up where he left off in 2000 by winning at South Boston in the opener for the Modified Tour. However, this would end up being the final race Marquis raced for car owner Fiore and would move on to the Boehler 34 team. While the Boehler team has been synonymous with modified racing for decades, it still wasn't a heavily financed team, but Marquis wouldn't let that slow him down. He was still competitive and had 5 top 5s in the first 7 races he drove for Boehler in. But his 8th start was when he struck gold. When the leader Ruggiero slid up the track with 5 laps to go, Marquis took advantage of the error and would get his 2nd win of the year on the tour at the Chemung Speedrome. He'd follow that up with winning one of the biggest majors in modified racing, the Thompson 300. Again, he had to hold off the Reg to win. And it was another race where some of the greatest and select few have been able to conquer, while the event was at its peak in existence. After finishing the 01 season with 3 straight second-place finishes, Marquis would officially drive the Boehler 3 car and do what he knew best and win. Just like the strategy he used to win the 300, he would wait until it was late in the race to make the pass for the lead, and eventually go on to win the season-opening icebreaker at Thompson. For the rest of the season, he would score 7 top 5s and 12 top 10s. In 2003, Marquis would rack up another 2 wins at Stafford, and the first one was done in dramatic fashion. Late in the event, Marquis chased down race leader Todd Szegedy and used lap traffic to pass him on the final lap of the Connecticut Classic 150. He led the only lap that counted and won by a nose. Marquis said, "It's all a blur to me. I was taking any hole that I had. Todd had the much superior car." He'd snag another win at the Stafford Fall Final in September to close out the season. But the biggest win I think in Marquis' career was next in 2004. The Spring Sizzler is dubbed the greatest race in the history of spring and is the biggest event on the racing calendar in the Northeast. The first ever winner of the event was Fred DeSaro in the Boehler 3, and Marquis was looking to get the 3 back in the Sizzler victory lane. The race was one of the most memorable as there was a very light drizzle falling for most of the event, and Marquis had to take a provisional starting spot to even start the race. However, Marquis took his time, and on a restart with 83 laps to go, he would take the lead. And with the faster cars behind him, somehow held off Tony Hirschman in what felt like every other lap. Hirschman made a move to challenge Marquis for the lead, but Marquis covered the bottom lane and held off the faster car of Hirschman to win his first Spring Sizzler. It was a very clean, late race duel for the win by 2 great champions, resulting in an instant classic, and what I believe is the biggest win in Jerry Marquis' career and the best Spring Sizzler in the past 25 years. As the season progressed, Marquis would snag another win at the Riverhead Raceway in Long Island on the Modified Tour, in what would be his final race victory with the Boehler 3 team. It was a very successful tenure, where Marquis won all the major races except Loudon. For the next couple of seasons, Marquis would drive for another legendary car owner, Bob Garbarino, in the Mystic Missile V4 Modified. They were a threat for the win at every race, and would win 3 races in the 2 seasons they raced together. The biggest win was the Thompson World Series, giving Marquis a win in all the major events at Stafford and Thompson. Marquis would retire from racing after the 2007 season with Joe Brady, but the short track ace still had the racing bug in him, and in August of 2011, would be called up off the couch and become the substitute driver for Rowan Penink, who had to race in Loudon for the NASCAR Modified Tour race. In yet another major tour-type modified event that became a tradition, the Waterford Wings in-wheels event for the Valenti Modified Racing Series, Marquis shined. In one of the best cars on the grid, the Gary Casella 25 car, Marquis would start on the pole and shut out the field to win his final race of his racing career. After starting out and winning back-to-back titles and figure eights at the Riverside Park Speedway in the 70s, to race victories in the NASCAR Busch North Series in the 90s and early 2000s, and everything in between, Marquis won championship after championship, race after race, and award after award in full fender cars and open-wheel cars. Words talk, but numbers scream, and maybe that's why Marquis is so underrated. He's drama-free, a clean driver, and a proven winner that always flies under the radar, which is just like his driving style. I think Matt Buckler said it best with this.
It's hard to believe that a driver who has won all the championships and all the races that Jerry Marquis has won is considered underrated. But that always seems to be the case with Jerry Marquis. He keeps winning races, other drivers always get more publicity. That's because his driving style is so smooth, sometimes it goes underneath the radar. Perhaps that perception will change after today's Spring Sizzler. Marquis conducted a clinic over the final 30 laps on how to win a race. Tony Hirschman had the fastest car, but Marquis held the lead and he wasn't going to give it up. He kept his car down low, told Hirschman, if you're going to pass me, you'll have to get around me, and he never gave up the inside groove.
I hope you enjoyed this video and share it with your friends. Maybe now Marquis will get a bit more credit for his accomplishments in the mainstream, and his story is told more often. I hope you enjoyed the new text-to-speech voice I used for this video as well. So long from the Speedway.